Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yes, it is. Okay.
All right, everybody, let's call the meeting to order. We got a ton to go through today, so we're gonna try to keep it really, really close onto the time here so that we got a chance for everybody to say a lot here. Starting off, approval of the agenda, introduction of late items.
We have a late item, perhaps to put in item 4.6 regarding historical MOU information that Judy might speak to.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might go well right after the conversation about the management model subcommittee. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
It's MOU. That's all I have.
Anybody else?
The rates information that we provided was sent around by email. The item 4.4. Offer me.
Everybody else, can I get a motion to? Thank you, Judy. Second? Yeah, thank you. And we're all in favor? Thank you kindly. Okay, adoption of the minutes from last meeting. Did anybody have any changes first
Oh, changes.
or any concerns? Going once? Going twice. Judy's motion to adopt, second. Thanks, Gail, again. And all in favor? Cheers. Nice and quick, we're 2 minutes ahead. Public comments is an opportunity for members of the public to comment regarding items. We have members of the public. We do not. No. All right. Move forward on that. Subcommittee reports. We're starting off with the policy review subcommittee. Lee, take it away.
Okay, maybe I'll share my screen. Okay, acceptable use. So we did work on 4 policies with between Fraser, Lydia and I for review here. The first couple are probably pretty straightforward, but here for review. So our first one we will start with is acceptable use policy. This is just a policy talking about how we expect the people to use things, what is acceptable. It generally just goes along with being kind. So comply with the rules, respect the rights and privacy of others, no discrimination, harassment, or bullying, and not engage in violent, or you can violate local, provincial, or federal laws, disrupt peaceful operation of the community center, or cause damage to their property, or compromise the safety or security of this building, staff, or its users. We will have a mechanism for reporting. We will have consequences, may result in disciplinary action up to and including banning from the community center or legal action. You acknowledge that by using that you are held or bound by this policy. Changes could be done, updated and revised at the discretion of the municipality / council, I think is what it should actually be. Any comments, suggestions, omissions, missed?
In the consequences, would it be applicable to also mention fees which may be accrued in case there are damage deposits or events?
I believe that's in the rental policy that if you don't show or if you're things like that, so that might be addressed in the rental policy. I think this is more in line with like the use of how you're using. I would say Judy, Fraser.
I think this was behavior as opposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I might suggest, if I may, is when I'm going through the vision statement and the core values, there's something in there that we've got about conflict resolution. Not sure if that might fit as at the very top in terms of quoting from our core value statement. It's 1 sentence or 2 sentences.
In the consequences or?
No, at the top of the policy, like right under acceptable use.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. I don't have it open, unfortunately.
Well, we don't have to necessarily make all the changes now. It was just an afterthought when I'm going through what I'm presenting later.
So vision statement,
There's a core value that says we shall be accountable for mistakes, approach difficult subject matter with care and attention to try to resolve problems fairly. See the code of conduct for user groups, staff, volunteers, and visitors. So we haven't approved that yet, so it's just an idea.
great.
I think Mimi may touched a little bit on this, that if it's just someone in the center and they damage something, it's not a rental issue, it's just a user issue.
Right. I would wonder what our rights are in like fines.
Well, I guess that's where maybe the police come in, and the police are caught, if the window's broken, for instance.
And then I guess would that be under, sorry to interrupt,
That's okay.
legal action?
Yeah, I don't know.
So that we do have a legal action in there already, like it's up to and including.
Yeah, and that maybe it doesn't need to be said, but I think should be thinking about it, that if somebody breaks something that's not a renter, but just a user.
While breaking one of these rules, like being a bully or being violent or anything like that, not like accidentally tripping and.
No, it's more like breaking
Yeah.
something.
Damages?
Sorry?
Damages?
Yeah, what if they break a window? They throw something in the center and the window breaks, or vandalize art on the wall. That, and they're caught, then obviously you're not caught, then
Okay.
I don't know where that needs to be said or how that can be enforced. I'm sure other centers have something in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you cannot cause damage to the property. Like I feel that's in there in those two, like vandalizing and smashing a window. We could say you gotta leave and you're not allowed to come back.
Right.
My understanding is that we've said just by being in here, you're agreeing to this. Just by being in the community center, you're agreeing to this policy. And, whatever our mechanism for forcing it would end up being is probably
I guess,
legal
yeah,
action and.
violating the policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Right, and as long as we have these policies, I think. Maybe Judy would know.
Yeah, in the rental one, which we'll get to in a minute too, there's a little phrase in there that says that if somebody were to the renter, whoever it happens to be, is responsible for the users within that event or group. So that would.
And they would have liability insurance for that.
For large
To
things,
cover
Yeah, for large things.
Yeah.
Like a show, so.
So I think those are really valid things to think about and consider. I also think that, possibly covered under this and
Yeah.
then possibly other, like the rental policy and.
Yeah, that should be even more enforced because they could break audio visual equipment.
Absolutely, and we have more
Yeah, but
recourse and
damage
we actually have, monetary
Yeah.
incentives, I guess. Anything to add or? Just gonna highlight this. Sorry.
The rules that are applied have not been written yet.
So for the purpose of this, are we as just laying a bit of ground stuff here for us, is the purpose of today for us to say we are going to, as a committee, accept these drafts with the idea that it goes to council?
Part of the package.
I believe that's the aim. But obviously there will be, additions and.
Yeah.
Additions and stuff like that coming from this. So I don't know. what
It's all
the
gonna
next-
go to council as a package, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So do we need a motion today for each one of these?
No, I feel like we agreed, I'm speaking because I think we did this process wise, we agreed that we would be like sort of informally signing off on these drafts and then we would compile them to finalize them with a recommendation that council approves them as a package.
At the next meeting?
Okay,
Or,
yeah, I think according to the timeline, sure.
it's pretty quick. Well, we do
Yeah,
have
next
a quick
meeting.
timeline
Yeah.
to get this going anyways, I think.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the final drafting
Okay.
before it goes to council.
hopefully. I mean, there are.
And if you want to do individual resolutions, but I don't think you want to recommend that that goes to council.
No, I mean, if we need to do a couple things, and again, you'll see a couple ones where they need a little bit more work, we're not ready.
Yeah, so the rent policy, we have a lot of things, questions and discussion.
Yeah.
But anything else to add to that? I think it's a relatively straightforward one that's, if not covered,
The easiest
other
one.
spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so the next one is like the accessibility policy.
So sorry, just to Fraser's point, then I'll just say like the committee agreed it was ready to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify that, with that statement that the things that are in here saying this will be filled in with, throughout this document, there are places where Lee wrote, clearly under use of space on page 14, clearly outline the permitted uses of the meeting room spaces and any prohibited, and those are in italics throughout the document.
The rental one.
Is it only the rental one?
I'm not sure which one. I'm sorry.
I just think there
We're
are
not
some
there
things
yet,
that are
no.
not filled in. Are we just agreeing in principle that when those get filled in?
There are certain things, that's the rental policy.
Okay.
Yeah, there are certain things for discussion and certain things that we are waiting to hear, like when we go through the management model subcommittee and other things like that.
Okay.
Actual hard numbers like months, dates, percentages and things like that, as soon as those.
Damage deposit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Gil.
Okay. Next one is accessibility, obviously a very important one to everyone, I think, in the community. It's when I went through and did this, I sort of based it on a lot of other accessibility policies, although I do think eventually we should probably send it to a committee for reading. But the aim is to not only be accessible in the real world, but also in virtual spaces and accessibility in how people can look, things like that. So basically, we're committed to ensuring that our services, facilities, and programs are accessible to all members, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. I'm not sure if we want to add something from the vision statement in regards to financial and like from the vision statement, but that's probably another place that we could do this. Include the vision statement there.
So it says, if we end up agreeing to it, it says right now, to ensure equitable access for the community of Bowen, that we seek to remove all barriers, be physical, financial, or otherwise, which may prevent someone from participating in community activities. Bracket CBIM accessibility guidelines. So that might be, instead of purpose, it might be core value. Something like that, it says.
Up here.
Similar.
Instead of saying purpose, saying core value, and just refer to the core value
Something
or
like that.
copy the core value in.
Yeah. I think there was a problem in another discussion at some point in terms of using the word disabilities. Vague recollection of that.
Sure.
Have you looked at other community centers, similar documents? Do they use similar wording?
I did, but it's been a while since I looked at this one specifically, because I was hoping we could get input from the accessibility committee also. But
So subject to some sort of polish maybe of that
yeah,
purpose. Did we ever find out about the web content accessibility guidelines?
So the WCAG 2.1 at level AA for website guidelines for accessibility, there's like a tool that you can put your website in and it scans your website and tells you how accessible it is. And then there are companies that will help you go through it and fix those. Since we'll probably be starting from scratch with our website, hopefully we can be able to do that earlier in the process so that we don't have to go back into it. I haven't talked to Janet and Sophie in regards to this, how we go about doing that. But I think it is important. And it's something that I've seen in other spaces. Because I think we can do it. It's
Move it
mostly,
in as a question mark at this point. We'll know by the time it gets to council.
yes, that's the hope.
The footer on this is wrong.
It's this.
Environmental impact and sustainable. And I tried to change it. I couldn't get it.
He's on it.
I'll change it again. So,
That was a really fun one.
so the facilities and services, parking, ramps, washrooms, large print and braille signage. Committing to having training for staff that work on site in awareness and sensitivity. And then also taking feedback and complaints in regards to, hopefully we can get it right, but there's always room for improvement. Any additions, any comments? I'll put in the core.
Maybe we just got a grant for autism training. Yeah, good one.
Okay,
Cool.
all right.
Thank you, Lee.
And then one more. A big one.
Mhm.
So rental policy. Obviously, the biggest one, obviously gonna be the most complicated. So in here, in this document, I do have, as Gail was pointing out, I do have italicized things. These were just things to help me to provide structure as I was writing this, to say what am I looking for? What am I trying to put under each of these little things? So outline the process for preserving space. Oh, Liam's here.
Hi, Liam.
Hi, folks. Sorry I'm late.
All good. We are in 4.1 right now on subcommittee reports.
Okay, thank you.
Draft rental policy.
So as we went through this, we had a lot of things that come up as questions about is this the direction we want to go? And our hope is to have this committee help guide that so that when we present it to council, we'll have good reasoning behind everything. So they are highlighted in gray for the most part. Some things are slightly different. So do we want to read the whole thing, or do we just want to go have what's the best approach here? Because it is really big. Is this something we want to read the whole thing? Or just our questions?
Any thoughts?
10 minutes, so.
All right.
We've got time, I think, for this one. That's
Sure.
Yeah,
So-
60-minute version.
Community center has several rental spaces, including 5 meeting, multi-purpose rooms, small kitchen, canteen, theater space, outdoor spaces. It is a priority for the Bowen Island municipality to support a year-round vibrant community hub.
Rather than reading this to each other,
Mhm.
can we go through and see whether or not there's comments and questions?
Sure.
I think it's slightly better.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Gail, did you have one?
Well, yeah, I marked my questions as I went through. And then there might be where you have question marks, like you have a positive question mark
Yeah.
of rental. Maybe we could make sure we hit your question marks
That's
too.
the aim. Our aim was the highlighted gray stuff is what we want to talk about
Nice.
here for the most
So
part.
I have one before what I see is your first question mark. So under item 1, reservation process, item number 2, Bowen Community Center, Hearth and Community Rec have priority over private rentals. I wondered how you were using the word private there.
I think that, so when I'm saying refer to the rental process document, I essentially started out with private. This was before we had gone through the rental process document. So I just haven't updated that because I wanted to get that sorted before I put it into here, because we haven't picked the one or the other. So I'm not married to just private. It would just be, I think we're going to have a big discussion over priority and how that works. The first one, to be honest, I didn't add a lot into because we've been waiting. This has been the majority of our conversations in that subcommittee, and especially. And now that we do have documents to talk about, then I was hoping to take it from there. And
Perfect.
move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure if there was something I was, a meaning, a hidden meaning that I didn't understand. But it could almost really read have priority over rentals. I
Mhm.
wonder if you could just go general there.
Yeah. So rates and fees, so that,
William's got his hand up.
oh,
Thank you for catching that. Liam,
Oh, sorry, Gail, were you suggesting take out private rentals? I see that being taken out, because I effectively, like, we're probably still going to be renting the space, but renting it from ourselves. From a bookkeeping perspective, I think that's, if we have preferential rates, that's great.
right, this,
Can we maybe just highlight it and
yeah,
when we get through the rental process?
Yeah.
Or the values of community focus or whatever the other documents are, then maybe we can. We were working on this the last time. The other stuff wasn't finished. So it hasn't been.
yeah. I think this is something we'll have to go back on and we'll have to submit. back
It's
for-
mirroring the MOU a little bit too, right?
Yeah,
okay, we've got a hand up from Kim.
Yes, thank you. I think because it's a policy document, I think it's important not to drill down too deeply into things like what the rate of the of a damage deposit would be or rental rate would be, and in the same way over the priority things. Is there a way to structure the document that it gives a framework for decisions to be made in, because I think it's going to take some time and some practice over the first year to find out how those things settle out. So I think if we put too much detail in the policy document, we're going to end up having to revise the policy document. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? After we're trying it out. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can go up a level in terms of this, like what we put in the policy document. Do you know what I mean? That because then it's giving guidance to the management team on how to set rates and how to set these things rather than putting it right inside the document.
Thanks,
right.
Kim.
Sorry, man.
Go for it, yeah.
My understanding is that all rates for municipal things will eventually be part of a bylaw. I believe that's correct, Liam. So they won't be the specific rates won't be in the policy, just a referral to the rates bylaw will be in the policy, which is what this is here. Sorry, right here.
Does
But I
that, so
do-
does that mean that the rates that are set are going to be a municipal bylaw? So if they have to be adjusted, they have to go to council to be adjusted?
Yes.
You can build into it though, the capacity to take on an incremental change based on like percentage change and.
You can
Right,
have-
but I
Liam
think
has something.
You can have a range and you can have some discretionary authority to set rates, but effectively all rates and charges, all fees and charges are enshrined in a bylaw.
so that's going to be challenging in the first little while, because that means we kind of have to get it pretty close, right?
No, amending a bylaw is not that difficult. Like, so we're going to probably have to amend it. You're absolutely right, Kim. Like, we are gonna have to revisit this pretty quickly and probably multiple times. But it's not that difficult to come back and so we do development permits and things like that on a relative frequent basis too.
Thanks, Liam. Did anybody else have any other comments on that? Okay, at the very, very end of this document, there is a section that says number 11, policy review and updates. We are going to get to that idea as to how often this is going to be reviewed, right?
Yeah, and just the mechanism, I think more. So in rates and fees, sorry if I can continue. Sorry, I apologize. The actual amount of deposit has still not been set in stone as we are continuing to work on what the rates will be, but that there will be a deposit for the rental. The number of months that it's required is up for discussion today also. And then also the number of months before you can get a refund is also up for discussion today as well. But one thing that we did come up is that, so if you've not received a minimum of however many months in advance of the reservation date, right? So if you're not paid within a certain amount of time, the community center has the right to cancel the rental. And in that event, the deposit will not be refunded in full or in part unless, and this is the bigger question, is that if we can find somebody to rent that space and time at the same or more than the original rental agreement. Does that seem reasonable?
They still paid a deposit, some sort of fee to pay for the administrative
So-
fees for.
Yeah, so there would still be a deduction for administrative fee, but if I said I'm gonna do this, I put my deposit down, but I don't pay the full fee by whenever we require full fees to be paid for, I don't get my refund back unless the community center finds somebody else to fill that rental space and time at equal or more, and then you would get your money back. Is that?
Yeah, that's a bit of an administrative headache, because what if you rented it for a week and usually rent one day out?
I bother
So-
putting that in.
Is that
Pardon me?
right?
Is that necessary? Actually, put that in part of the policy.
I don't know. I mean,
That was the question, in
That's the
terms of, you know, if we end up with, somebody, it's X number of months ahead of time, and somebody decides that, for whatever reason, they can't, the wedding is off, somebody's died, it's, it can't happen this year. So, do we keep the deposit? And if we do rent it out, then, we've got a double deposit, and, is that something that we want to have going on in the community? Right, and should there be a policy in terms of, once all the dust settles, and, one of the questions was, who's gonna take the time and the effort to find the backfill? And, is it worth the hassle?
We've got Liam's hand up here. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common practice to hold a deposit and if you're clear about what the cancellation policy is and what the return of a deposit looks like, then I see no trouble with that. And so like we have I'll go back to development permit fees and building permits. Like sometimes we have deposits and we end up holding on to them, and sometimes we're able to return them depending on the scenario or the situation. And so I think the way this is written is pretty generous. And I would suggest that there is a, almost like a two-stage, at this kind of like booking accommodation. If you cancel within a certain time frame, you'll get your full deposit back. If you cancel with only like whatever notice, you'll only get 50% of your deposit back. And if you cancel with less notice, you'll get nothing back. And there's an administrative overhead for all of that work that we did to book that event. And then we're doing double work to book another event. So we're not actually getting a double deposit. We're trying to do cost recovery. And so the deposit is part of the recovering that cost of providing that service.
And we had talked about that we want to deter renters to book a bunch of spaces and have a damage deposit and then be like, oh, whatever, I don't need that money back. But then in the meantime, all that space has been booked and no one else has a chance to take that space.
Yeah, we did talk about this in the rental process, and it is in there too when we talk about it later. To me, it's more about, do we want to take on the administrative job of, oh, we got a renter, here's your money back, or do we just want to say, sorry, you dropped your side of this bargain. We did our best, you've done your best, but unfortunately, this is how the rule is, and that's business. But to other people's, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is like, do we want that feeling in the community of like, well, we're double dipping now?
I think Liam had a good point where there's different levels of how much you get back, like an accommodation. Different, 2 weeks, months out, 24 hours.
Yeah.
I think this is actually a good idea because I think that it's being written for people who are first-time renters or one-time renters. And remember that a lot of the community user groups will be ongoing renters or maybe working under the umbrella of the Hearth. And so they will be able to manage this a lot better. So I agree with Liam that having a good business model and clearly laid out for people who are first renting, like for the first time renters or are planning to use it as a one-off, it's good to have a really clear policy. So I think it's good to keep in mind that some of the people that are regular users of the space will be working, once they understand it, will be able to work within it. And again, as I say, if you've got a block booker like the Hearth or the municipality, then some of the people who we're thinking of who will be using the space might be working under that agreement. So these rules will have flexibility when someone's talking to the Hearth, let's say, or working with the recreation department.
Yeah, I feel that a clean arrangement that is saying just based on the timeline of when you cancel is a lot simpler. And I definitely don't feel that we would do anything that places onus on us to fill that spot that somebody vacated.
Yeah.
Well, because we wouldn't if
It's a
somebody.
good idea, but it's a hard one. Yeah, the administrative nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also, so it leads to people sort of feeling a little bit more, I'm entitled to my deposit back. You didn't work hard enough to fill that spot.
Yeah.
Right.
So then, whether or not the deposit is refunded in full or in part is based on. We've got.
Would you
We're
pass
talking
it?
about an administrative fee. What are the kinds of things that we would?
Well, what I think we've seen lots of in other facilities and starting to look at within the cancellation policies, it's built on the months, right? It's built on when do they actually
Right, which we
cancel.
do have an outline for in the rental process. Okay.
Well, so I'm sorry, but this is one that's just that they pay the deposit. It's not that they canceled, they just disappeared into the night.
Exactly.
Right, and they ghosting us.
So I'm not sure. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're gonna amend this here.
So then we just drop out the part that's highlighted after the comma, unless BIC has been able to rent the space. We just drop all of that last part of the sentence. And leave it with a deposit of X is required X months before the first day of the rental period and will be held as a credit towards the damage deposit for the rental. However, if the room rental payment is not received a minimum of X in advance of the reservation, the BIC has the right to cancel the rental, and in that event, the deposit will not be refunded in full or in part.
Really, there's two issues. It's someone that forgets to pay for the whole rental. Well, which means that the staff person has to say, hey, you've got to pay your rent now.
Right.
As opposed to someone just not using the space, and then you've got this prime time that sits empty because someone's canceled. And we only receive a small administrative fee for that. I think there's two issues.
It's like if you're not going to convert your blocking to a booking, you lose your deposit on your blocking.
if that 3-month date has passed. If the 3-month date has not passed, just like if you're doing with booking.com, like Liam's analogy, up to a certain date, you get a full refund. After that date, you get, a full refund minus a 15% administration fee is what we were proposing. Because it's work. And that until 3 months ahead, you've lost bookings, almost for sure. Something has slipped through the fingers of the community center. And so the 15% administrative fee is just covering the time of the financial, the finance department having to do a refund. It doesn't cover the costs of lost opportunities. But we've set what we think is a reasonable deadline of 3 months, I think was what we proposed. Maybe it needs to be less or maybe it needs to be more, but that's what the management subcommittee has proposed and that's what's being reflected here.
Okay.
I think we need to keep moving along here because we got a fair bit still to do.
Just one quick change. I don't think it should say towards the damage deposit for the
Yes.
rental. It should be towards the payment of the rental, right?
Mm.
We were talking a little bit earlier about damage deposit versus rental deposit.
The deposit is required. Be held as a credit toward the rental.
Yeah.
The rental fee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Next question, sorry, if we can move on from that. Who gets a free rental? Do we have a mechanism for people not being charged? Whether it's a community group or I don't know. I don't know how we do that. Is it something we have to go to council for, or do we have something written in? Who decides?
Any comments? Kim?
Yeah, I think the way we handle it is we never ever use the word free. What we do is we use the word subsidize. So it's good for accounting and keeping track of it. So what we do is we say that some rentals are subsidized, and then we look at a mechanism for how that subsidy happens. Where is it coming from? And so we set our rates, and then you go, okay, this user group for whatever reason, and that's where you get into policy. And then that's what you need to like work out is what's the policy where it comes that it's being subsidized. And is it being subsidized by the municipality? Is it being subsidized by the hearth, like whoever the group block booking is? So it's a little easier to manage that way. It takes out the word free, right? So no one's really getting it for free because there's always a cost associated with it. So maybe there's a way to word it that it's a subsidy that's available, and then there can be terms about what the rules are around this subsidy. It also puts a protection in because you only have X amount of money to subsidize, right? You go, we've only got this amount of subsidy, and then it's whose discretion is it? So that's the way I would structure it. There's a subsidy, it's got a certain amount of limitation on it, and it's done at the discretion of, like, what's that mechanism?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, when I said who gets a free rental, it wasn't policy talk.
I understand completely. But it does, it's a really good point, Lee. It's a really good thing to have in the policy. It's just that how you structure it.
Yep. Are you thinking like a fundraiser group? Someone trying to raise money for
Possibly, or I don't know.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. So some people can have access to the space if, for example, if they're subsidized, we do that because they're fundraising for us, right? Or they're giving, it's a fundraiser for the place. So therefore, they're going to be able to do that activity without having to pay rent on it, right? So you waive the rent. It's a subsidy that they're getting, right? Although we do the in out on it. But there can be other things like, for example, if it's a very important meeting that needs to happen within the community, right? There's certain criteria where you go,
Like
this
town
is
hall?
such an important event that the
disaster
rental will be
hall.
subsidized.
Or a disaster. Thanks, Kim.
Oh.
Judy?
So who has the discretion?
That's the point I wanted to know, yeah.
Who makes the decision with Presentation House?
That's pretty easy. We're guided by a policy. Senior management makes the decision on it, which is basically Andrea and myself and Giselle. We have 3 people, and it's in our policy that we get to have the discretion to subsidize certain activities that happen in the building. So by that we mean is we write it that we're paying for, we're going to cover that cost. So we do it as an in-out.
So what do we have to give? A community meeting, and we said emergency plan, like in a disaster.
Like say there was a disaster
Yeah.
in some country and somebody wanted to do a fundraiser to like, we need to really support.
Tsunami in Japan.
Exactly. Right? And we're like, this is something that's really, you know, it's got a hugely important to many people in the community, and it's not something that we're like, this is something we support. And we don't want to take people money from people that are trying to raise for some sort of, I don't know exactly what it is. I'm just wondering what that.
Judy?
Okay, so we haven't worked it out. So let's say that that's a question that gets highlighted. We're going to change the name. It's not free. It's going to be subsidized. We're going to work on a policy for subsidizing, and we're going to figure out who is going to be given the discretionary power and what the guidelines are going to be. Right?
There's different levels of subsidy.
Yeah, and we don't have that in here yet, in any of these documents, right?
No.
So it's worth including, and we need to work on it.
Okay.
Right?
And I think with the different levels of subsidy,
Yeah.
just so it's in the books.
Yeah.
If it's 0, it's still, it looks like the event, but there's 0 rental and it's in the books.
Yeah.
Or accounting or whatever.
Yeah, it would have to be still accounted
Still
for,
account- Yeah,
but it's, yeah, who gets to say that it's, or who gets that 0? Right, how do we?
or different levels of subsidy.
Right,
Like I
because
say,
we also don't want to just get into the like, you know, I just need it for an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna like, I don't have any money, but I just need it for an hour because, you know, it's me,
You're my friend.
right? And I just want to make sure like, and that might be fine. Oh, I forgot one. But that might be fine, but it's also, like, we need a way of quantifying it and protecting it and guiding it.
Sure. Steph, you had a comment?
Process-wise, council does the noise bylaw, parties and weddings and stuff quite quickly. Like it's a few weeks. So it could be that process if you were just gonna decide to subsidize something, just send it through council the same way. That's
Liam's got his hand raised.
Yeah, I would, exactly what Steph was saying. So it's noise bylaws and there's other opportunities for people to request permit fees to be waived, and that's council's discretion. And it's a pretty quick and simple process. And so I think it'll be a bit of a trial and error, and we'll see how many requests we get. I think we should start with it being council's discretion. See how many requests we get. Are we getting overwhelmed? And then do we need to be more prescribed in how we do it to minimize the impact? And in terms of the subsidy, that'll be built right into the rental rate structure. And so that'll be, well, I shouldn't say it will be, but in looking at the rental rate structures for other municipally owned facilities, they basically identify different categories. Perhaps there's 4 different categories of users. And if you fall into one of those categories, you get a differential rate. And so I think we've talked about that in the past.
Okay, thanks, Liam. Kim?
Yeah, I see this as separate from the subsidy rental rate structure. And my concern would be that you've now said a couple of times, it's easy to get things done at council, but then are we not asking council to kind of micromanage it a little bit? Because that means there's always needs to be a justification put forward and a decision made. And although, yes, you can say that it can be done in a timely manner, I can see this being problematic because whoever is trying to run the place is then going to have their hands tied every time they come to try and make a decision. that's related to what might be good for the development of the space. And the ongoing running of the space. So I would lean towards setting a broader policy that the council reviews and looks at and said these categories outside of subsidized rentals, that these are the categories as we were discussing earlier, where the management team would be able to make those decisions so that every time it came up, they weren't having to go to council and say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. We have to wait till the next Monday council meeting to give you an answer on that, to make that decision. I just see that being overly cumbersome. That's just my view.
I'm gonna go Gail and then Liam.
Oh, just, I concur with what Kim just said, and maybe what senior management, we could just look at what is senior management for this facility. Maybe it's one employee from Bowen Community Rec, one employee from the Hearth, which would either be our executive director, or if we get our new job description, program and artistic director person, and one employee of BIM, which would be, in this case, maybe Lee Vincent. So, it would be, I'm not saying what it should be, but it could look something like those three might be that senior management group once the policy has been adopted by council.
Let's go. Liam?
I think I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea. The greater latitude that staff have to operate, the better in some regards. All due respect to Councillor Getty there and the other councillor.
I don't want this.
Yeah, well, I guess I've got a question and a comment, and one is the comment is that I would think that in the prescribed rental rates that we would be, identifying, okay, the lowest rate would be capturing the majority of like the not-for-profit or like unorganized groups, and it would be quite affordable to use the spaces. And it's sending a message to the community that we do need to recover at least some costs. Like, this isn't a totally free facility. And so then my question is to Kim, how often are you getting requests for free or fully subsidized use of this space? I just don't anticipate that, maybe we'll get a dearth of it in the beginning, but I think people will come to understand that, well, no, it's not free. I mean,
right.
Do people get to use Tiranog and Cateshill Chapel and those types of places for free?
Well, I think it's a very good question, Liam. Thanks. It isn't. There's basically two categories. One category is driven by policy. So, for example, we developed a policy where members of the Squamish First Nations are able to access the space for free for certain activities because we're on their land, right? So we worked on a policy in relationship to that was a kind of a proactive statement about how we were working with the community. So that's one group. So that's pre-thought out, policy driven, only decided once, and then the policy is there. The other one is actually comes up on an ad hoc basis, right? And so there are things that have come up where, which is like your emergency thing, or there's a really important meeting that has to happen within the community, or a group has come and approached in relationship to the community. And this is actually to do with the city sometimes, and sometimes with the Chamber of Commerce. And again, it's like it's at an ad hoc basis where we kind of look at it and decide whether or not it needs to happen. And this is often because of there's just varying factors. It's people who are not trying to get the space for free. It's often because there's no money being generated through it, and it's a problem figuring out who's actually going to pay for it, because there's a lot of user groups that are involved in it, ourselves included. It's kind of like a town hall meeting idea, right? And so we just need a mechanism to let the thing happen, right? Without like worrying about who's going to pay for it. And you're right, those don't come up very often. But when they do come up, sometimes they come up quickly. That's the challenge, because it's a timely thing. And you get a call and say, we need a space to get a whole bunch of people together to talk about something. So those are the two times. And one is quite rare, and the other one is policy driven. I hope that helps.
Right. that
Getty had her hands up
definitely.
first.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead, sorry.
Councillor Getty had a hand up earlier.
I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to think of all the possibilities and all the examples. One of the things that Lee and I talked about at one point was, what about this new group of kids that, you know, are underage, maybe can't rent it themselves, maybe don't have a sponsor, they wanna do something for the Pride Parade. They just wanna have a couple of meetings and, you know, they can't get into the pub and, you know, whatever. So the room's free and, you know, somebody makes a decision and says, yeah, okay, you know, it's when you start into a situation where you're raising funds, then we'll, you know, you'll be part of the rate structure, but you know, for the time being, whatever. And I think it's giving us the opportunity, without figuring out all of the details until we start having some questions asked, having the ability to just have that, somebody makes a decision going, you know, okay, that's a good decision, oh, that was a bad decision, or, you know, we can reflect on it later. But we'll figure out, I think this is our to-do list and it's, you know, worth figuring out and putting some more time into. And, you know, I think that maybe we can check with the CSA because they make all sorts of decisions in terms of use of the school when it's a community group. And, you know, if it's a little extra paragraph in our rate structure, then that gives somebody some discretion. So I think it's not fleshed out and it's something that we can play with.
Liam?
I don't know that the CSA has the ability to waive rental fees for the school. They would have to pay the janitorial service. That is an absolute must with the school district, and so that. But
Well, I won't rat them out then, shall I?
Well, that might be their own. They may be covering those costs themselves then, because yeah, otherwise they're not able to do that. But don't rat them out. But,
I think
Too late.
the other bit was just around you know, I'm comfortable going forward with this idea of like giving some discretionary authority, but we've got to be really careful because it's going to be an issue pretty fast, I think. And so because there will be people asking and it's going to put somebody in an awkward position to make those decisions. And so I just go forward cautiously with that. If council's comfortable with it, then I'm comfortable with it. And then ultimately too, I think there will be times and situations where council wants to use this space for things like open houses and public hall meetings and things like that. But ideally those would be pre-planned and pre-scheduled. But if all of a sudden everybody's, you know, gathering pitchforks and stuff like that, and they're like, you know, then yeah, I think there will be that opportunity to make a decision quickly to say, okay, well, we're just going to use this space and we'll deal with the rental issue or anything like that after the fact. So I think there's always going to be that kind of opportunity or option if there is a true emergency or a real rush issue that has to be resolved.
We've got 15 minutes left for these draft rental policy thing here. So I'm wanting to speed up a little bit because we've got a couple other things we want to go for. Any last quick comments on this section here?
Yeah, I think sorry, I'm just gonna, I'll be very quick. I think it is tied to the creation of a senior management team and then structuring how those decisions get made, because I think at the same time, if it goes to the council to make the decision, I think there's more opportunity for people to have a lot of different opinions on it. And there needs to be a clear process because it is subject to availability, right? And people possibly getting bumped. So
okay, thanks, Kim. Sorry, anybody else? All right, I just want to move us along. Sorry.
Thank you. So next step will be cancellation policy, which sort of goes along with what we already talked about. Require a minimum of, I think we've said 3 months for you to cancel, for you to get any money back, minus whatever the administrative fees end up being, 50%, whatever those end up being. But do we want to have this part here that says failure to comply will result in full payment of the rental and or forfeiture of any payments received for the rental unless we can rent the space for the same or greater fee.
We had that.
I think we all agree.
Keep moving.
Beauty.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And then events canceled with will receive a refund. Event of emergency or health reasons, reasonable requests may be entertained. We also reserve the right to cancel a rental if like building fund, like if there's a flood or something, right? Without adequate notice for certain reasons. Use of space. So this is a little bit more fleshed out than the other one. So
One thing about that cancel, if it's canceled for an upcoming town hall meeting that you didn't expect and you're bumping somebody, they shouldn't have to, they should be able to get their full damage deposit.
yeah, so I should, so yeah, that's a good point. So in the event of emergency or for health or safety reasons.
No, the next one, events canceled, so many months, notice will be received. I just think that if you're bumping somebody for like a
I
municipal.
don't think that's what it
Sorry,
says.
that's a different one. I think we're on the right spot.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, just one moment, Lee, do you have your hand up or was that from before?
Put your hand out, aren't you exhausted?
Sorry.
Losing all circulation.
So I guess we could say that if we cancel you without notice, we would give you all your money back.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll massage that.
Yeah.
Use of space, so it's a shared and publicly funded community asset and the use of the center must reflect this fact. We had this highlighted. I think this is pretty straightforward and clear, but are we comfortable saying that in a policy?
Will reflect or does reflect? Must sounds legislative.
If there's no comments, I'm like, I think it, personally, I like it. Councillor Getty was, do we remember why?
Yeah, and it might have been later down and it just got reshuffled, and
Maybe.
that's why it's highlighted, but
I think
Is
it's
anything
highlighted
controversial?
at the beginning.
yeah.
It must comply with all laws. Event bookings of a religious or political nature must be held as a private function only, not allowed to recruit. Weapons have to be
Checked at the door.
checked. So we have to, there are industry standards for use, like in a play, you could have a weapon, right? And those all have to be done to comply with industry standards.
And martial
fencing
arts
class?
demonstration with
Yeah.
swords, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also need to be pre-approved. Same with open flames. You have to be 19 plus to book, and anybody under 19 requires adult supervision.
I had a comment on that one.
Okay.
In principle, it's probably the way to go, but is there an opportunity where like there's a youth group that is somehow an organization that has an entity, and I don't know what that would be.
Well, like Queen versus Green.
Okay, I don't know that one, but
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
If they are an entity that is a legal entity, could someone under 19 book it under that legal entity? I don't have the answer, but I just wanted to throw that back. It would be nice if there was a way that like, if there's a student council, let's say, in a school, and they are an entity that already has sort of embedded supervision, it would be nice if youth could actually make the booking, because I really do think that that increases their character and, you know, and their civil engagement. So if there's a way to work around that, I don't think we should discuss that in large amount here. I just wanted to throw that out for the committee, that subcommittee to look at.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
I think it's a legal liability.
I think it's a
Yeah.
insurance thing.
So when you
Actually,
say
it
no-
isn't. It isn't. We rent out to a zine. They're 16-year-olds. We've done that many times. So it's not a liability at all with insurance at all. Just so you know. So there is a way. I don't mind. I think we don't need to discuss it here, but I'm happy to help how you structure that so that you can have zines happen there, which are youth driven. They design them, they book the space, they run it, they do all that kind of stuff. We have a separate set of regulations around that, but we allow that to be, because it is an empowerment thing.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Kim.
Excellent. I'll reach out to Kim.
How do you like the last one?
No rentals,
Yeah.
identify criminalized organizations.
The mafia.
Excuse me, no mafia. Equipment and services, so essentially you can't mess with electrical panels or outlets. Tacking or nailing is not permitted unless approved. Same with non-resident residue. I don't think we have to go over that, do we? No. Setup cleanup times are included in the time reserved. So there's, if your reservation starts at 2, you're not allowed to set up until 2 unless you pay for it. And all setup is responsibility of the renter, and then you gotta leave it as you found it. If you don't, you could charge there would be a holdback on your fee for cleaning fees.
Okay.
That doesn't include washrooms, right?
Washrooms are public, so you're not booking the washroom. To me anyways, I don't think you can book the public washroom because you can't preserve the
You may
washroom.
have some, challenges when you have a really big group, like a wedding coming in and they're using the washrooms and they're left as a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
Yeah,
custodial consideration.
It is, I would imagine it's possible to rent the facility, like, not many people gonna do it, but.
I think you're right.
The washrooms have to be accessible to the public at all times. Washrooms
Not
are
if, not
part
if
of.
you've rented the whole facility.
Does that mean that council wouldn't be able to use the washrooms? Well,
Council's only there.
Gonna come into a wedding.
Yeah.
But so is it, you're making a provision that someone can rent the entire building?
Not the municipal hall, right? Not the municipal offices.
Right, so that's
but you could,
public washrooms are.
let's say you were gonna have a conference, for example, right? You could use all of the meeting room spaces for smaller breakout rooms and have the large room as a presentation room. You could.
Yeah, it's just that, Liam, public washrooms are still public washrooms. So we don't like no one, because sometimes they want to, film companies, they want exclusive, and we go, yes, you can have the whole building, you can have everything, but the washrooms are still public. So it's just a tiny thing, but there's certain parts that are like because they want to say like, no, we're going to take over this washroom and we're going to use it in this way as a dressing room, for example. And we go, well, we still have our staff in the building, so they still have to be able to go to the bathroom.
Okay, we got 5 minutes left on this document here, so I just want to keep us on. Judy, did you have sorry, Councilor Kim?
Kim, do you do this, leaving the venue in as found condition? And if so, how do you sort it out in terms of what that condition is? It's like when you rent a car, you walk around the car and you tick off a diagram. Are we do you have something like that?
This is good. This is good because it's the idea of it, right? You say, leave it as you found it. We build a buffer, but the document is still the same, saying the rental is for the time that it is, but we build a little buffer in case people go over, but it's clear in the policy. So it's in the practice, we have a little bit of flexibility, but the policy is very clear.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay. Access and security. So you're only restricted to the rooms that you have rented. You're given access just for the time that you rent, and you may be given keys if needed. That will need to be returned. You can't make copies. You can't not return them. You may get charged for rekeying if that happens. After our rentals, keys may be issued according to a key issuance policy.
Just a quick question, the keys that are cut for especially the main doors, are they do not copy
Yeah, they will.
printed on them?
Yeah, those are, we have a full company that's.
Key program.
It's a whole, yeah. But thank you for, that's a good point. So then in here, it says access to the public washrooms and showers will be considered as included in the rental of any room, but public washrooms and showers cannot be reserved or rented privately. So I guess that goes back to what Liam was talking about, what we were talking before that, where you can't book the public washrooms. Got it. But it would be built in, so the rental fees are gonna have custodial time built into them, presumably, that way we consider that you're gonna be using the bathroom, so we have to pay for stuff that's in a bathroom and all the cleaning that goes with the bathroom. So that would have to be something considered within.
We used to have
Sorry, we're really tight for time, so I want to make sure our league gets a chance to sit through all the rest of this.
Liability and insurance. So for minimum of 2 million liability for large events, weddings, receptions, parties, trade shows, or high risk events. That was presumably at the discretion, or not discretion, sorry, that's it. So what the other thing is, we're still looking into, like, for small events, like for those youth meetings and things like that, do you need special insurance, or can you just be covered under our insurance in regards to liability and equipment coverage? I'm looking into that with Kristen right now.
Thank you.
Liquor licensing and catering. No alcohol between regular working hours or regular operating hours, which would be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We could change that. Just there will be kids in the building.
Yeah.
We need to be notified. Can't bring your own bottle event. Must obtain liquor permit and present that at least a month before the event. Can't go past 1 a.m. And liquor has to be kept inside the rooms that you have permitted or reserved. You need serving at right-hand food service. That's just a basic thing. When you do get a permit, you have to have those things, but we have to. It's good. Catering services are not provided by the community center. You may bring in your own food or hire a catering company to provide food and beverage services at your event. The renter must ensure any catering company shall provide a copy of their current food safe certification. Yeah. So there's no cooking or refrigeration currently within the building. Barbecues or outdoor cooking could be permitted in the courtyard if you include that in your rental. So that may end up being an add-on or separate rental. Any questions or concerns about any of those?
I'm just gonna go back to the cleanliness thing again. People have different levels of cleanliness.
Mhm.
They're using the kitchen area and they leave it in a disaster.
Yeah.
You gotta,
They have to pay.
I've run it
That's
well.
part of their final payment.
Well, you can keep back the damage deposit to cover janitorial services or whatever.
Is there a procedure for payment in which they have an invoice, it's not paid until after the event? Or is it all paid in full ahead of time?
Currently, I think the model we're working under is that you pay in full before your event, and then the deposit. We're still trying to figure out whether there will be a damage deposit that you'd have to do, which I think we would have to do. And that would have to be held back, whether or not that's a percentage of what the rental fee is, or if that's the flat fee.
I think the key to your question is it depends on the deposit, and
Yeah.
usually weddings and film are charged more. The deposit's almost double
Okay,
damage deposit.
right. Thank you. Okay, code of conduct. Follow all directions. And then that, the community center will hire supervisors, and you have to listen to them, supervise the building, and in any emergencies, saying they retain the right to terminate any rental at any time should they not comply with rental policies. The renter is responsible for behavior of all of their guests. Excessive noise inside or outside the building should be kept below to 70 dB. The loss or damage of the building or equipment will result in partial or total loss of the damaged deposit. So that's another thing to go on that deposit holdback. Capacity limit. Yep.
Just thinking about the noise, and I wonder if we need to add something in about our noise bylaw. Because how are we going to accommodate like evening rentals spilling out onto the courtyard? We need to follow our own.
Yeah.
I mean, a concert's gonna go over 70 decibels easily. Sorry, Liam?
Yeah, exactly. You will, and the 1 a.m. also will need to be looked at in relation to the noise bylaw, and there may be concerns around that, because I believe the pub isn't allowed to stay. What time does the pub have to close? I think that's in
I'll just go down.
We never go. Yeah.
But we'll need to confirm the time of closure, or like back in section 8, and then so. But definitely noise bylaws, like weddings are probably gonna wanna get those, or if we're having a rockin' big band, we're probably gonna need that. It's right next door to the the apartment buildings, so.
Thank you.
Great. Capacity limits will be set and must be followed. We have the right to move things that could, also consider that if you have really big things in a room, that constricts how many people you can have in the room. So displays or decorations may further restrict the number of people in a room. Just to make sure that exits are clear. Fire exits have to be clear and accessible. Non-smoking property. Smoking and vaping are not permitted on any part of the property. I don't know if that will be controversial or not. Seems like it's pretty par for the course for many public spaces now. We retain the right to eject anyone not in adherence to any policy in this document.
Eject sounds like something like that.
We got eject is a funny word too, so that can change.
Leave it.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Like there's a spring.
Exactly. Okay, sorry, keep going. We're over time.
Dispute resolution, I think we could go back into the core values and put that in here, but one of the ones that I saw in a bunch of places, if the renter deliberately, negligently, or innocently misrepresents any information required of him or her by this agreement, or is in violation of the terms, then the rental agreement may be canceled with immediate effect, and the rental may not be allowed to commence or continue if the event is already in progress. So something like this I saw in a bunch of things. I don't know, Kim, if you have something that you might have a difference, but it essentially says is if you're breaking the rules, like you say, we're gonna have a knitting club and you come in and you've got volleyball nets, we have the right to say, sorry, you can't be here.
Thank you. Liam?
Oh, it's a quick one, if we can just do a scan to make sure the document's gender neutral, that'd be great. So replacing gender with they, them.
Okay, thank you.
No, Lee, I think it's a good clause.
Thank you. Staff reserve the right to refuse the use of any room to individual groups who do not or have not previously met with the conditions outlined in this rental policy. So essentially, if you break the rules enough, you can say, sorry, you can't rent. Reviews and updates. This will be all council based, I believe. I'm not sure if there's any references, approval, communication. It'll be available.
Thank you, Lee.
Sorry.
Before we move on over to Gail and programming and curation, does anybody have any final comments on any of that?
Excellent work.
Please, matter thank you to Fraser and Judy, everybody actually. It's been a big mishmash.
Awesome. Thanks.
Really nice. Thanks.
Okay, Gail, the floor is yours.
So we only have 10 minutes to discuss this, which is not a lot of time. So I guess I'll just do the same as Lee, where I'll sort of more entertain questions as opposed to going through the whole thing. The only thing I just want to say is from a rationale perspective, I'm just going to do this like 1 minute. We really have effectively 3 areas of responsibility now for this new hire, this proposed hire. One is to attract and populate activities in the center. The second is to oversee the arts presentation series by the Hearth, which is would help to make sure that there's offerings in the theater that are not just local artists presenting their work, so that we can be sure that at least someone is able to make a stab at bringing in a season of work from some local talent, but a lot of off-island talent. And then the third, forget the facility primary stakeholder coordination, because that's quite a small little job, I think. But the fourth is to basically do what was being discussed at last JMC meeting, which is to basically be the booking coordinator and event coordinator for all other types of events that are not arts and culture specific. So we sort of, we use the task list below, which I'm not going to go through, even though it's on the agenda step. I'm sorry, thanks for including it, but I'll just refer to it and say, we used it to help flesh out, especially category number 4, the facility booking and event coordination role. Okay, so that's all I thought I'd present, and maybe more field questions if people like that. Otherwise, I can speak more to other details.
Got a thumbs up from Kim.
Excellent.
Jillian?
I was just thinking it'd be interesting to see how we anticipate the time allocations within different responsibilities.
Thank you for bringing that up. Nice. And I did write to Liam today and kind of even, I really do see that it's about a third, and a third. The facility primary stakeholder coordination, number 3, I realized afterwards, Lee, after we worked on it, I should have put it as number 4. Because in a way, it distributes its attention out to all of the 3 categories. That primary stakeholder thing is basically overseeing the memo of understanding that the community rec, municipality, and the hearth basically are the first to kind of plan times in the community center. And so number 3 really should be number 4. And I think we could say that the effort is split equally between all 3 identified priorities. So if you can just in your mind's eye make number 4, make B number 3, just for talking about it. 1, 2, and 3 are really like a third, and a third of this job description. And then number 4 is kind of broken up over those 3/3. So a third of the job will be to deal with all incoming arts and culture. So when Tony wants to do a show, our booking, this individual will meet with them and make sure that Lee is aware of all of their needs and what their booking is and what all the add-ons are, and make sure it's all coordinated. And then do that for all of the organizations on Bowen and other ones that are incoming from elsewhere. So like if the Fringe Festival says, hey, can we do an offsite on Bowen Island? This is the attract and support arts presenters. That would be their job. So number 1 is a big portfolio. Number 2, and by the way, and writing grants and attracting some development ideas, creating funding and developing ideas for how to populate more and more activity in the center. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that the Hearth Presents series, they would coordinate that. And even if it's not a third of the activity, let's call it a third, because it's how the Hearth will be very involved anyway. So we feel we should take some responsibility financially for that. And then number 3, which is really at number 4, but if you look at it as facility booking and event coordination, as far as we understood from our last JMC meeting and how Lee and I especially interpreted, but also with Jamie and Jillian at the last meeting, we understood that this would be the main person who people, when they call and say, hey, I'd like to do something at the community center, whether it's recreation or anything. I don't mean Bowen Island Community Rec, but I mean, if they're like, they want to run a yoga class or anything, they would, or if it's a wedding or a conference, any other kind of event that isn't arts or culture specific, they would be going through this person too. So they become the event coordinator and the booking person for the municipality. So that's another third. That's the last third of the activity of the allocation of the job description. That's how we were seeing it. And my proposals around the funding pretty much follow that 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. We could talk about that if there's time.
We got Liam with a question.
Yeah, thank you. Gail, this looks great. Sorry I didn't have a chance to respond. It's been a pretty busy day. But in reviewing it just now, it looks quite a lot better, quite a lot more in alignment what I've been thinking about in terms of the needs of the facility. So thank you for all that great work. I think one of the questions that I have is, it is around that time commitment piece, and maybe this is also for me to better understand the work that the Hearth currently does. So would this position be focused on work that's solely happening at the center? Or would it be also supporting work that would be happening at the Hearth Gallery down at the by the library there too?
Yeah, thanks, Liam, for your question. We've always thought of this new hire as one of the reasons I asked, would there be space at the center? Their job would be very focused. All of it is focused on the community center. And the responsibilities down at the gallery space, the Hearth space, would not be in the purview of this person at all, except in the regards to walking down there, driving or walking down and meeting with their executive director. But yeah, this job is focused 100% on the community center, and that's how we would be meeting the responsibility that we've been offered to be a partner with BIM.
So the Hearth Presents series, though, isn't that would that be moving from the Hearth Gallery up to this community center, or?
No, because it's performing arts based, Liam. So whatever we'd be doing here, what this person would be programming is not visual arts. It would all be performing arts, and it would be geared towards primarily the Bowen Theatre.
So not much more in those performances that currently occur at the Hearth. Not much more of that occurring there. Most of that moving up, if not all of it moving up.
There's almost no performing arts presentations at the Hearth because we don't actually have a space for performing arts. So very, very little happens. Maybe a couple of times a year we have some events. We have a DJ at our gallery openings. We've had a couple of, literary events. But there's no dance, there's no theater. There's been like little occasions where something like that has happened over the years. But this is the initiation of a performing arts series on Bowen under the auspices of the Hearth. It doesn't exist. It's never existed before.
Okay. No, this is great. I really like where this is going. And I think this is great improvement. And so thank you for the effort on that.
I just want to clarify one thing. If the Hearth does have an opportunity to have a performance, a small performance in the gallery space, I would hope that we still could do that.
Yes, it just wouldn't be done by the programming.
No.
It would be done by Jamie because Jamie oversees events at the other Hearth space. And this new hire, yes, but it wouldn't prevent Jamie from having a literary reading in the Hearth or something of that nature.
Or on the stage as well.
I saw a hand over here, maybe.
Thank you for the work that you've got together on this. I'm wondering, the role that you're talking about, the third portion, the facility booking and event coordination, it's a bit of a mouthful. And I'm seeing referenced in other locations that when someone looks at the procedures for renting the space and what the deposit is and the cancellation policy and like that, the production administrator is referenced at that point. And the person's renting or producing an event at the space, they understand that they're going to be meeting with the production administrator. They're going to be looking at the site. They're going to be discussing what the rental fees are, what the policies are. So within that, the policies that you just went over, perhaps that person, that role can actually be mentioned. The production administrator or production manager can be mentioned during that time.
And rental policy?
Yeah, in the rental policy. And so therefore, the people from the public who are renting the space are understanding that there is that person that will be making the liaison for them.
But they would also contact Lee.
Exactly.
Audio visual.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the purview of this.
Exactly. That would be laid out in the procedures for the rental policy of what steps they would go through. And that would be indicated as well.
Thank you so much. So we're running a bit behind here. So is there any last little comments or?
I just want to make sure I understand Mimi's comment because I think it's really important. Sorry.
We could go back to it. If the three of us, we could chat about it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Liam has
Great suggestion.
Liam, thank you.
A very quick question, Chair. What about things like IT technology and other equipment? Who's responsible for equipping this person with the tools they need?
Technical equipment or website kind of population? I just want to make sure I understand.
Like, so a website, I think, and booking and everything is gonna be under the purview of the municipality, I think, to kind of work that out. But in collaboration with everybody. But I mean, like, you know, so like I imagine they're gonna need a laptop, a phone, those kind of things, print, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, no, correct, the staff.
Staff support.
Like who?
Provides the staff support? Is that,
Who provides the computer? Who provides the phone?
yeah,
That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, for that staff position?
got it.
Oh, yeah, we were kind of
a good
we were
question.
kind of thinking that that position would actually reside at the community center.
Sure,
Out of the heart.
but does that mean then BIM is providing the laptop and all?
We've put it into the grant, the application, Liam, to, right, I think we might have put a computer into that grant, the one, the BC Arts Impact Grant. So we're very much trying to make it as much as possible subsumed under the grant that so let me get back to you on that through an email, but it's a valid, important question.
Also, the extended health benefit package.
Yeah. The one thing we were gonna ask you guys to consider offering is the extended health.
The benefit.
The benefit package.
That's only, yeah, that's only available to actual BIM employees, so we can't offer that
Okay,
to external employees. So I mean, that's where we come back to this kind of question of like, oh, okay, well, who's the employer for this person? And then
well, it
if
needs
it's-
to be the hearth so that we can apply for funding, right?
Right.
So
we
maybe
can't
that's-
we can't extend that benefits package in that way.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know, but maybe that's where the laptop could be traded off for the building tech. I don't know, but let's talk more about that, but that's a really
Yeah,
important
yeah.
question. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
And that was why we were asking it last, I'm finishing up, promise. That's why I was asking at last meeting if there would be a space at which this person can work
Yes.
at one of the desks.
Definitely, but everything's mobile now. We don't have any fixed desktop things.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Yes.
Will that person do the art on the walls or the hallways?
The visual arts display,
Mm.
it is not part of this person's responsibilities at this point. We have to just.
That hasn't been discussed.
It hasn't been fully discussed, and this person has gotten too big a load as is, but we've broken it up into three, and they know that a third, and a third of their job is going to be, so they'll have to figure out how to allocate, but the visual arts on the walls would be way outside that person's purview.
I just had thought that Jamie was gonna be chomping at the bit to get her hand on it.
All right, speeding things up a little bit here. Thank you, Gail. Any last comments before we move to Councillor Getty? Okay, overarching mission and course value of the whole building.
I'm presenting this, but there were a bunch of us that worked on it, so I can't find the list of who's on the committee at this point, but where are we? Fraser, no, sorry. Myself, Mimi, Jillian, Kim, and Gail. Okay, so I don't know if you've been keeping track, but this has been narrowed down considerably. A lot of it was done over emails as opposed to meetings. We ran out of meeting time and there were just too many meetings, so we've done it. The one that the vision statement and the core values that has come around, there was one comment for an amendment afterwards that goes to the very first sentence. So the suggestion is that the Bowen Island Community Center aspires to be the heart of the community, a place where Islanders can gather, share, and participate in activities and events that build and celebrate a healthy and resilient community. And then we get aspires again. And so then the corollary question is whether or not we want to repeat that word or whether we want to. There is no synonym for it. I've been looking up and this. You know, there's a certain rhythm to repetition, but I don't know, it's an aspirational statement. It's been chopped down to something that's sort of quite an essence in terms of everything. So a lot of the flourishing and a lot of the we went through a great long process of taking out we's because we couldn't figure out who we represented. Whether it was the management group or whether it was the community or whether it was who it was. So what you're looking at is a fair amount of effort that's gone into, which doesn't mean that it can't be changed. But if we want something that is succinct and specific and hopefully representative, then this is what we've got to offer in terms of the vision statement. Let's start with that. How do you feel?
Any comments, anybody?
I just want to say this is great. It's so hard to craft these types of things, and so I don't know. So far, this meeting is feeling really really fantastic for me because we're getting a lot of good traction here, and I really like this.
Right, and I would
Kim?
just like to maybe propose a motion. This might be a bit radical, but that we as a committee accept this as a draft that can be put forth to council. And as a draft, right, for them to look at, knowing, as Liam said, there's obviously going to be adjustments to it, but I think we've done an excellent job, and thank you, Judy, for doing the yeoman's job of pulling it together. It's always hard to draft by a committee, but I think we're ready to just, you know, to make a motion that it gets included in the package and just use the word draft on it, right?
Okay.
But
How do
this
you feel about
official-
repeating aspires to be?
At this point, I think it's fine because I think it's as a draft document, it's the sentiment there, you know, you
Okay.
being a lawyer may have different ideas. I'm sure it can be nicer in some ways, but I think it captures the essence of all the conversations that we've had. Well done. So I think it's officially in a
Okay.
motion. Looking for a seconder.
Second.
I see Mimi there. We'll give her a shot on this one. All in favor?
Sorry, what's the motion?
Adopting this one.
The motion is to put forward this document as a draft as part of the package going to council. So this will be the first one that we've all agreed on that'll be part of the package, right? As it's been put together. And we just use the word draft.
Okay.
Okay, have you had a chance to look at, oh, well, I'm interrupting a little.
Well, sorry, before we do the vote, if this is relevant to that, I'd like your input.
Okay, have we had a chance to look at the core values part of the document? So we start with the land acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Grateful to join them in caring for this land and all its inhabitants. That's a new line. We're following a precedent that Mimi found for Roberts Creek. So we've copied theirs. Diversity and inclusivity has changed and been narrowed down to a very short sentence, and same with accessibility and equity. But I think it covers what we need to cover, and it references some of the other documents. We had a section in there about how we wanted to run the community center on humanist principles, and that caused a whole lot of consternation in terms of how would that be interpreted? What exactly do we mean? It's a little bit difficult to explain. So then we just got it down to conflict resolution, and we want to be accountable for our mistakes and try to resolve problems fairly. So that's treating, we're not there for the profit motive, we're there for our community building. And we thought that this was the essence of what we were trying to say there. And then governance, we thought it was important to repeat that Muni has ultimate authority and that the Joint Management Committee exists. And it's here to recommend policy and budget and implement the decisions of council. So it's that weird combination. I've taken out subsequently in my copy, but it's a weird combination of municipal and community and recreation, and that's what we're trying to emphasize and make sure that people are clearly understanding that that's an important part of our core values for this building. So I think we've checked all the boxes. If you come up with something that you think we've left out,
Oh,
I hit the wrong button.
Well, was that a hand being raised?
No, it's
wow,
This is supposed to be
you're
this.
getting pretty fed.
It's really good.
So any comments before we jump to a little vote here? Okay,
So we've already, it's been seconded, so
It's been
final
seconded by
discussion.
me.
Now we're doing all in favor.
all in favor? None.
Those opposed, those opposed.
Those opposed? I think we all got unanimous. Thank you so much.
Woo-hoo.
Awesome, we're getting a lot done.
Got us back on time.
Close, almost.
Quick question, what are the BIM accessibility guidelines? It's come up a couple times. Yeah.
EDI.
That's more of a, like, that's your guys' internal policy, isn't it?
Well, we have.
I'm not aware of that existing. Yeah,
Accessibility guidelines.
Oh, okay, I thought we did with the accessibility committee.
we're working on an action plan, but
We were.
yeah, okay, so that's what you're referring to. Okay.
CBD.
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, any last comments before we move to principles, rate structures, and categories of use? Okay, Mimi, thank you. We have you on there. Were you?
Do you happen to have the notes? Like, yeah, I think she.
Yeah, I do. I'm just, some resolutions, I'm just getting that all organized, exciting.
Yeah, so basically I did not do anything about principles. I looked mainly at rate structures. And I did this when doing this, I created the list of what the hard costs would be and then the potential list of what additional costs would be. And this is mainly to imagine what the rental of this space would look like from that point of view. However, it's important to understand how many events per year we're wanting to charge at full rate. How many events a year we're going to, as Lee mentioned, that we would allow rental of the entire facility. And then from there, decide how many rentals we have that are part of the second or third tier of the kinds of events that we can host. As Kim mentioned, they're the nonprofits, maybe they're a First Nations group, there are school groups, there are different categories that we'll have for the rate structure. And then the higher paying groups, which will pay a larger deposit, will be for weddings and for film and for the use of the entire space. So I think it might be important to figure out what our revenue requirements will be, how much annually will the revenue from the events be expected or anticipated.
That's a really hard question to answer, Mimi.
Right.
I think it's impossible to set all that and then put it out there and then expect it to happen. It's because you're dealing with a market-driven thing, it's an organic process. So what you can do is you can say, these are what the rates are, and then you see what the uptake is, right? And then you can set priorities. You can set priorities of who gets priority of the other people, but to set quotas and to say that we're going to rent it out for 12 times a year at this, and then we're going to try and fulfill that, or say, no, we've already had 12. It's really, really, really hard to have that run that way. So my suggestion is that we've done the work on the priorities. And the next step is setting, as Liam said, if these rates need to be approved by council, then there's a little bit of work about putting together some proposed rates as proposed rates to start with, to get them approved by council, and then they start to get implemented and see how they work. And one of the guiding principles is for some of those user groups is we know what they're currently paying already. So we know if we set it if we double it, there's not going to be a lot of uptake. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And it just needs to get put into a document with some numbers put into it. And then Kristen can look at those numbers and figure out whether or not they're realistic. you know, in terms of, or meet the goals that the city's expecting. I think we're pretty close because we know kind of what the community is. I think what we don't know is what the top end would be like, you know, if we had a private rental coming in. But I've been looking for some guidance on what the cost of running the place is to help set that rate, right? Because we don't want to undershoot it so that the municipality is losing money on every single rental. So that's kind of the, Liam, I don't know if you have any ideas on how we can figure out what the market rate is.
I
Yeah,
can
so-
speak to that if I can just interject for a moment. If you go down to the bottom of the page, the 4 sites that are referenced, those 4, if we click on those, if we want to go to details, it's all on their fees pages. And so there are some really clear examples of what the market rate is for some of the bookings. And some of the venues also, Roberts Creek, for example, and the Roundhouse, they say on their rental policy and their rate policy that it's to be determined according to the group, that the production administrator will make the decision about what the fees will be. So I understand you're wanting to have the fees posted. And if we want to do that, we can look at what the market rate is for Port Moody, Roberts Creek, for the Roundhouse, et cetera.
Sorry, Lee.
I think we have to set rates just because of the bylaw. I would assume that we'd have to have hard numbers that would be integrated to that bylaw. And
And those are some hard numbers, some specific rates we can compare in terms of other community centers.
Yeah, and I think this is great because this gives us a sense of what other facilities are charging, and we do have some rental rates which we've sent around earlier to this group from other school districts and the like. And essentially, like, I think I've said this before, we know that it's going to be hard to do full cost recovery because the cost of actually operating the space is pretty expensive because it includes debt financing. And so we'll strive to recover as much of the cost as possible, but it's not necessarily a full-blown requirement. It'd be fantastic. I would love us to try to get there. But I think that will be difficult in the initial years.
Gail and then Councillor Getty.
Did this document get shared?
It got shared by email, subsequent to publishing.
Today?
On yesterday and the day before, yeah. I
Monday.
can resend it if you'd like to get it to your inbox.
11/29. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that even though I'm not sure that the figures are the best, when I looked at the inlet theater rates for Port Moody, the layout made a lot of sense for us. Even the way they have commercial and private events, artistic performances, nonprofit groups, and then nonprofit groups that are Port Moody based. It's like those 4 categories laid out quite nicely with the sort of way we were thinking in terms of 4. The way they did it in that square was very helpful. And if you actually look at the rates, the artistic rate and the nonprofit rate, or the artistic rate and the nonprofit local rate, whichever, were the same. So it's like there's really only 3 rates, but they're what is the word for their rationale for the rates are broken up into 4 distinct categories. 2 of them are identical. 2 categories are identical with one another. I just think that one is a really good one for us to, I felt it was really applied well to the way that our management committee, subcommittee has been thinking and working our way through. Thanks for that research.
Yeah.
There's also on that Port Moody site, just to go back to something earlier, a fee waiver application form. It might be helpful to.
Which application form?
Fee waiver application form.
That's an idea.
Okay. But
Maybe the way we can maybe the way we can proceed is to set the commercial rate as a beginning proposal, right? And that's the top rate, right? And go, this will be what the top rates are in that category. And have that as a proposal that goes towards council, and then something that says, and there's going to be these other groups that'll be subsidized, and then just figuring out what those rates are. But you're right, we do kind of have to start somewhere. And if it's going to be impossible to like look at that, what the cost recovery is, then we just pick a number that puts us in a comparable relationship with other communities.
Okay, Liam?
Would it be all right if I shared my screen for a moment?
Mhm.
To just kind of come back to this, make sure I get the right one. Are you seeing a green table?
Great, yeah, green table rate sheet.
So this is School District 43, Coquitlam's rate sheet. And so what they have is essentially, they have a category A, it just doesn't get charged. So they effectively have 5 categories of user groups and different rates. And you can see it's a significant difference from category B at $5.75 an hour for a classroom to $43.75 an hour. So, you know, it's not so much that we have classrooms, but this is a structure that I quite liked and how they've set it up. You then go to the second page and it identifies the groups, the types of groups and organizations that they serve. It identifies the group names and types, and then the types of use that they would use the space for, and then ascribe a rate category that they fall under. You know, so interesting, you know, so all these category A ones are automatically free or subsidized, to use Kim's terminology. And then we look at, you know, commercial, private, or other groups not considered above are category E. So that includes weddings, private birthday parties, strata council meetings, conventions and conferences and the like. And when you look at category E, you can see, oh, okay, for all these different rooms, they're paying significantly more than double than any other rate. And so I quite like that structure. It's pretty clean. And it seems to me, I haven't had a chance to look at those research that Mimi did, but the way I was hearing those other ones described, it seems to me like that is a similar approach. And so I think, yeah, we're all kind of zeroing in the same kind of thinking. And to Kim's point, we just got to start getting some numbers on a page.
Thank you. Councilor again.
Okay, so I haven't had a chance to go through this document until just now, and I haven't had a chance to check out the links. And I'd be interested in getting a copy of the one that you have, Liam, as well. Just so, and I'm going to suggest that we table this to the next meeting so that we've had a chance to look at it and think about it, and, you know.
I'll resend. It's been sent to this committee a couple of times. I'll resend it again.
Okay, well, maybe just a reference in terms of whatever the date was when it was sent out before. But it's, you know, you're on Zoom and it's not coming up on my screen that's got an email and blah, blah. So it'd be worth digging into it a bit.
Yeah, so I would just like, if we are gonna table it, I would like to flag something that people should look at when they're looking at the Port Moody. When you're comparing the commercial private rates to nonprofit rates and how they're laying it out, I think that I just like to flag this for people to observe so that we can discuss it. If you look at commercial and private rates, you will see that the cost of the theater is different Sunday to Thursday than it is Friday and Saturday. So take note of that, please. And then also take note of the fact that once you get past the cost of the rental of that space, the theater space, and the rehearsal rates, once you get past that into technician rates and front of house and all these other things that are itemized, they're identical for every group. I don't know that we want to go that way. I just wanted to flag that so people could take notice. Because it's a very different rationale than what we've been thinking maybe, but it's not a bad concept. But maybe it's not a good, anyway, please look at that thoroughly when you are reviewing that one. Thanks.
Mimi, was there anything else for you? Okay, thank you so much. Any last comments? Okay, Jillian, Management Model Subcommittee,
This is really, nice here.
get it done.
Yes. I would definitely like this to be a group discussion from what we have here, because I think there's a couple of key areas within this. So I think looking at how we identify what a priority user group is one of our issues or components discussed. The other piece is that booking process. But the big overarching question that those of us in this subcommittee kept asking over and over again is actually, how do we apply priority? That's the biggest question that we had to struggle with a little bit. So, and I think some of this feeds into obviously it all feeds into the discussion that we added as another bullet point, but actually wondering if it's
Well, we added it for immediately after.
immediately after, I know, but it might influence a little bit. So we had looked at, just for simplicity, how do we recognize, how do we define these priority user groups? So just one thing to think about, these priority user groups, this is not the conversation about the fee structure, right? This is just about that booking process and how when they're allowed to. So we're not looking at different rates within these priority groups necessarily. So the
Just a
first
moment,
one.
Kim. Sorry.
Keep going.
So one of the big difference here being in one of these, the value of community focus, there were 3 priority groups. And then the other one, there's only 2. So essentially the top priority is municipality and council, the hearth and community recreation. Being at that shared level of access. Committees are of council. Yep, community. And in one of these versions, community groups identified as a second tiered priority. And the other one is sort of putting basically everybody else in that other tier priority. So, and what this influences is when they're allowed to book. At this time, that's all we could think of in terms of how do we implement priority? How do we apply that? It was just in terms of booking. So I think it warrants a discussion on, what is priority actually before we delve into. But I'd like
Well, Kim, thank you.
Sure. I think how we apply priority is actually pretty straightforward. It's first right of refusal. So the way we do it is you're allowed to put a hold on it, but if a group has a priority on it, we say we're putting a hold on it, but there is another category has a priority, and then we say these dates have been booked by these people, but you have first refusal on it. Are you going to use these dates? And then if they say no, then we move to the next priority. So it's pretty straightforward. It seems cumbersome, but it really isn't, because people are booking far enough in advance. So you've got your deadlines for when you're going to book by and all that kind of stuff. But when people come in and they're booking from a lower priority, we just contact the people who are the higher priority saying, and we do it through a series of holds. So if you've got top priority, you get to just book it. If you're the bottom priority and you want a date and we'll put a hold on it, but our process is to check other people. So for example, as the people who run the place, we have top priority. So our first discussion is we go, those dates are gone, they're already booked. If they're open and we're not going to use them, we have first priority. We say, are we going to book it? No, we're going to let it go. We've checked with ourselves. Then we move to our next priority group and we go, these dates, you haven't booked them so far. You haven't said you wanted them. Now's your chance. And you've got a certain amount of time. And then we get back to the low priority group and say, those are yours now. But we've gone through a priority process. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how we do it.
Thank you, Kim. Gail?
So, yes, that's exactly what we've been working our way through. And what we came to as a subcommittee is that we realized we couldn't make this ultimate decision between these two possible realities that we tried to lay out for you. One, do we want to turn away a conference that reaches out to us and says, we're going to pay top dollar? And that, when we tried to differentiate the revenue being enough of a priority to put the conference at the same time as the community choir in terms of when they get to book, exactly what you're saying, but we want to know from this committee, as a subcommittee, we want to know, should we be putting those two at the same time so that if a really good bid comes in for a conference that's going to pay us thousands of dollars for a weekend, should we be setting them up to be as competitive with the community choir? Or that's the revenue focus proposal. So I'm just helping you read this. The other proposal is, this is for everyone, not just for you, is what happens if we want to say that the community choir at 18 months out can book it, and the conference has to wait until 15 months out before they can book it? We might lose revenue, but we keep our community happy because they don't get taken out by organizations that are more organized and can put in a booking hold sooner than someone else. That's why we really wanted to come to the JMC, because we got ourselves in a tailspin after a certain point. And we realized that until the JMC gave us our marching orders, we were going around we had reached around in a circle moment. Everything else has been laid out really clearly in our minds in terms of how to do the bookings and the holds and the whatever. So we're sort of not really asking that just right now. What we're asking is for direction on, should we be placing revenue generation at an equal footing on some level with community representation? That is all lower priority than those that are stated in the memo of understanding, meaning the municipality, the community rec, and the hearth.
Right.
Those live at the top.
Yeah, and we run into this not that often, but it does come up, and it comes up with film. So what happens is, and it usually comes up late, which even makes it more challenging, when you have a film company coming in and saying they want to rent the entire theater and pay us $10,000 when we have a community choir in for $50. So our approach to it is, one, we're transparent. Two, the user groups are considered part of the place. So sustainability becomes the issue. So we include the user group in the discussion, saying, look, we have an opportunity as a community, as a user groups that we're all together on it, to generate this kind of revenue. Is it possible for us to move your date? Like, can we change it? Can we change your venue? And so sometimes we'll move things into another venue in order to accommodate this large revenue opportunity. We don't have to write it in policy saying that making money takes the more priority, or is it the equal priority? It's kind of at the discretion, and the user group still has the priority, except they're participating in revenue generation, right? So it becomes a relationship decision with the user group on trying to generate the money. And in some cases, the money that we're making, we can increase it so that the user group that's being displaced is an example of somebody who gets a venue for free. In other words, they're fully subsidized because they've had to adjust, right? Now, if you want to put that in policy, but that's just the way we work in practice.
No,
Thank you.
So
I
I
agree.
just wonder, that's
Just a moment.
super helpful, thank you. And so that's a great example of priorities being identified, but for a late booking, you know, and I love your example. And then for the more kind of the stuff that is written into policy, like can you book 2 years in advance? Could you book 18 months in advance? Could you book, do you have any, does anyone have any thoughts about whether, so these are the long ones out. I love the example of like the close range one, where you might have to move, involve someone in asking them to move. Do we want to put private, like weddings and conferences able to book at the same time as our community choir and toady? Do we want toady to be able to get some dates on the calendar before those people could lock something up or not? That's a big question that we have, and we just keep not knowing how to solve it on our own.
May I just, sorry, Liam, is this?
Sorry, we got Liam as well too, but Kim, quick, go for it.
Sure. I was just going to say that those user groups want to be on a recurring basis. So it's, yes, 2 years in advance is great for people so they can set up their rhythm, what we call it, because they book the same time every year or around that time. And then we allow that to happen because it becomes easier to manage. And then you can't, a lot of weddings and conferences are one-offs. They're not recurring activities. So I would look at it, the balance between recurring activities and one-offs. I don't know if that's helpful, but we want people to lock in for a recurring activity so they get into the rhythm of it. And then the one-offs, whether they fit in between those, work a lot better unless someone really insists they have to have it on that weekend, and then you have to bump the recurring activity. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Liam.
No, I was just gonna say, it's similar thinking, Kim, but I do believe that the intention all along was that the arts community would be able to have some advanced booking and some security in that. And so, and I, you know, just from when I arrived, there was discussions between the Hearth and ourselves, you know, about how, yeah, we would come together a couple of times a year, like, so probably in the fall, pre-planning the next year, and like a mid-year check-in, if not sooner, and basically sort of saying like, okay, well, let's fill out the calendar with all of the bookings that we know that we have, and they kind of get that prioritization. And then there's all these gaps that we try to fill with the higher revenue generating activities. Now, I think if we get this $10,000 weekend opportunity, there's nothing stopping the new programming arts director to sort of say, like, you know, approach, maybe it's Toady or maybe it's the choir group, and say, hey, we've just got this golden opportunity. You know, is there any chance that you would be able to reschedule your event? You know, looking at it in that way.
So how?
Jillian, just 1 second.
Yes, it sounds right, but then the logistics of it is that the user groups who are somewhat the lower priority, they're the ones going to be booking first. They're the ones who are going to have that longer vision out. So that's where the challenge lies a little bit.
But that's okay, because that's a big part. This is community. It's community center.
And I think you just need to wait and see how
just
it
1 second.
plays
We
out.
had Gail, just 1 sec. Here, go.
Yeah, we're actually not contesting anything that anyone's saying. Once you actually drill down on the details when you're trying to write policy, it's just not quite as, I mean, the logic of what everybody is saying, we have no problem with. It's just when you start to put things in 2 years ahead. For instance, we're drilled down on things like just 2 years ahead roll from day to day. So on June 1st, is that the 2 years ahead? and then June 2nd is 2 years ahead? Or is it like, are there cutoff, we're in the trenches of detail. And so we're actually, so thanks for the big thinking, but we're kind of stuck in the small right now.
Mhm.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, I understand. It does roll, Gail, just so you know. And the reason is in practice, it's very different because people, when they book 2 years in advance, often are shifting. It's organic. People call up and they say, we booked this 2 years away. Now we need to move our deadline and we need to move it over here. So it's really hard. You need a broad policy that allows literally the priority discussion is what's important. It's really hard to implement a policy where you say, we're going to lock this calendar in and these people are booking 2 years and now it's done and now we're not going to touch it and we're going to move forward. Shit happens. And so you're always dealing with this on an ongoing basis, regardless of whatever policy you put down, it's always coming up, right? Because it's just the reality of the situation because shit's always happening out there, you know.
A reminder, we're being broadcast live across the whole world. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Stuff happens. So it's very hard I understand completely, Gail. It's very hard to write a policy that someone can look at to help with that. So my two comments are, one is, it is rolling 2 years. It does mean that it is 2 years in advance if you're going to look at that. But the longer you put it out there, the more shifts and changes you will have to that, right? So you can pick a number, 2 years is good, or 18 months, and then you just have your priority list, and then you have a mechanism to deal with it. That's as clear as you can get on
That's what we're
policy.
wondering about.
Yeah.
That's the.
Well, you know,
Mechanism,
I think
everything.
the mechanism is a priority list of who you contact, right? So if somebody is low on the priority list and they're booking 18 months in advance, you check around with all the people of higher priority and see if they want to put a hold on it. And then if they have, you want to get people locked in to a rhythm, right? But you will find, I would say it's highly unlikely you'll get a wedding 2 years in advance. We get weddings 6-8 months in advance, right? So 2 years are for the people who are really well organized. Highly unlikely you'll get a conference 2 years in advance. You'll get it 3 months in advance.
Thanks, Kim.
Sorry, Jillian, you got your hand up?
It seems to me to be quite challenging to call everybody who's a higher priority group and say, we know you haven't given us dates, but do you think you might want this one? Because somebody else is interested. Like that just seems like a lot of management to do.
It can be, but you don't have that many on your priority group and they're usually already booked in, right? So if Toadi's a priority group, they've already figured out their dates 2 years in advance. They've done their organization and planning. So often it's just like, no, but it's just courtesy, right? You go like, this has come up. And it also includes them in the managing of the place. Because remember, this is all about revenue generation, right? So the people who are low priority are spending money. So when you talk to all your user groups who are subsidized and say, hey, we can make $10,000 because GM wants to come in and do a big conference on this weekend, it's disrupting. But we've always found the user groups go, yeah, okay, we'll shift because we know that $10,000 is going to help pay for this place, right? So it's not as cumbersome as you think it is.
Maybe we're stuck and we don't need to be stuck.
So,
Yeah.
Yes.
meaning,
Wouldn't contacting the different groups be part of that third portion of the new position as well, cutting out the calls?
Yeah, exactly.
Not your work.
Someone else's work.
It is if we get funding, that would be that person would be.
They would start with that right off the bat in order to populate that calendar.
This was the discussion of the core values that we took out of that overriding policy, because did we want it to be person oriented or did we want it to be profit oriented? So it was, I think that at some point, if it becomes particularly popular as a conference place, And I can't imagine it because of the kitchen facilities, but let's say that, that all gets changed and it becomes, something like the CNIB, every group, and it's the perfect size for the medium, tiny little conferences. And, there's enough bed and breakfast for people to stay and all the rest of it. And it's a destination in terms of so close to Vancouver and all of the middle management groups. So, if we end up getting flooded with people that want to reserve outside of the time frame that we're normally going to be trying to figure out arts and culture and recreation, so that it looks like everything's getting booked up and there's no space for the choir and there's very little space for a week-long theater production. I think then we have to start saying, there's limits and we don't want to become a for-profit place. And we want to, have at least equal consideration for all the little local community groups. Especially when they're using the big performance space, because that's the one that's costing us the most, right? So somehow or other we have to have a balance, and I think it whether or not that can be worked into a policy, it's we're getting into if a whole bunch of people come along and say they want to book out 18 months, 24 months, then that's getting into the whole MOU discussion between Hearth and Rec. And that's when we all have to sit down, Hearth and Rec has to sit down and say, how do we adjust to this in terms of, booking, making sure that we've got enough music and we've got enough theater and we've got enough whatever it is that we want to promote in the community. But unless and until that happens, I think we just book it. If Theater on the Isle showed up and wanted to book, the last week of May, and it's already booked for a $10,000 conference, and be like, okay, well, we'll do the first week of June then. Right?
Well, nobody can bump somebody else's booking unless there was like that the conferring in either direction.
I think Kim wants to make a comment.
So, and Theater on the Isle is gonna try and do, something in the spring and something in the fall and something later on in the winter. And, that's sort of the way that we're gonna have people that are willing to learn the lines and do the production. So not over the summer necessarily, although that may change, but, if the MOU, it's interesting because, I didn't realize that was the difference between the two policies, that was the problem that you were I thought it was, between the priority users. That's what the MOU is talking about, right? The three priority users, and the MOU focuses on, how to deal with all of those needs. So, in terms of the first, second, and third priority of potential customers or clients or bookers, renters, then, I think we just have to figure out, get as much revenue as we possibly can, and if that becomes unmanageable, then we start talking about changing.
Remember the MOU was We got Kim's had his hand up for a bit and he's been waiting, and then Jamie. Kim?
Okay, I'll be very brief. What I feel is that it's actually about a sense of ownership of the place, and the priority groups are priorities because they're part of the community, and they should feel connected to the community center. And I still would like to reinforce the idea that they participate in this kind of decision making by being consulted. We just find that works so well because they understand the reason you're looking at these for-profit activities to come in is they're revenue generating, which feeds back into the community center. So I think philosophically, what you're doing is you're putting the priority community groups into the same box as the for-profit one-off users by saying they're all just users group and we're having to manage their priority. But I think it's the other way around. Some of the people are part of the community and are engaging in the community center and should be consulted and be part of that decision making in order to generate that revenue. Just going back to what Liam said, right? So I
Thank
think
you.
that's the mechanism we're looking for.
Thank you, Kim. Jamie?
Oh, just the MOU was written in 2020. By the time we open the center, this may be adjusted, the MOU, because it doesn't really work. But I think the MOU has to be a little flexible too.
Well, if we're gonna get into a discussion in terms of the competing interests of the first priority group, then that would be what the MOU is trying.
I definitely think that there are priority users in rec and the hearth or arts and culture are definitely priority users. And then community groups.
Right.
I'm sorry, I have one clarifying question for Kim, who's no longer there. Oh, he's there? Okay. When you say you're reaching out to community groups, is it only when they've already booked a spot, or if it's an open weekend and you get this $10,000 conference and it's 18 months out, are you going to your community groups who haven't booked it yet? They have booked all their other things, but they didn't book this one specific weekend. Are you going to all those community groups and saying, do you want this weekend too?
We do it quite quickly, right? And it's not that many groups because we have our priorities, and there are what we call our regular users, right? So they're people who are already booked, and we kind of do that. We go because they're usually locked in. So it's actually quite simple because, for example, if we have a group like, let's say we have North Shore Light Opera, they book every May, right? It's a recurring event. We literally do a courtesy call saying, hey, in October, we've got a film thing coming in. You're not planning on doing anything there, are you? No, great, we're gonna book them. And so they're known because we just contacted them because they were a priority group, right? Occasionally they go, oh, we were planning on doing something then there. I said, well, you better decide now because we're going to get this money, and this money is significant to keeping us going, right? So that's the rhythm of it, right? So it doesn't come up that often, I will tell you, because you maybe, these large groups that come in 2 years in advance, we don't see them coming in 2 years in advance. We see them coming in at a lot shorter notice, and they're filling the gaps, as Liam said.
Liam?
Yeah, Kim, do you have an online calendar that shows the availability of the space?
We absolutely do not, because people, it generates so much traffic of people calling in. We just say, call us. Right. It's particularly for the theater for that very reason, because people look at it and they think they can get it.
Yeah. So but I think whether we do that or not, I don't know. But I do think that I just don't imagine us calling every user group, because we have such a dearth of potential users, because it's not just a theater, right? It's so much more. And so we're not going to call every potential user group that could be on a list. I very much, to Lee's question, would say that, we would only be calling if there's a conflict. And so we would be looking to the priority groups that at the beginning of the year, it's probably actually the fall and winter for the coming up year, to say, okay, you need to give us your dates. We got to lock this down, folks. And then, all right, we do that again in May, and then we do that again in October or November, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because then you just give a deadline, right? You say, you've booked your stuff, you've had your priority's expired.
And if you want to come in and you want to book more stuff, great. But, if somebody beats you to it, well, then maybe that's the way it goes.
I just want to stop here for just a second, just say in the interest of time, how's everybody feeling we're 15 minutes over kind of when we were expecting to be. Yeah, no, I wanted to check on that. So maybe this is something, again, this conversation to be continued.
I think so. I think more conversation.
We want to be able to move forward.
No, we do, for sure.
On this.
Yeah.
So the actual management model subcommittee documents were not reviewed? Do you feel like the conversation dealt with those
Get around
documents?
their documents.
These,
It's
yeah,
looking
we
great.
talked about, yeah,
Okay.
we just didn't go through like details of booking and time blocks but that's okay, I think.
So I have a Tuesday, June 4th penciled in here for the next JMC.
And sorry, one other thing too, Judy, did that satisfy your inclusion into the agenda in terms of conversations about priority?
I think mine is a different conversation. So it might come back up later. But
Do
in
you want to
terms-
put that at the top of the next agenda?
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we're just gonna jump through next couple of ones really quickly here. Any other subcommittee discussion? Nope. Brilliant. Action items from last time.
I think everything was done. The rate structure piece needs a little bit of work. And moving forward, Lee's gonna apply recommended changes to the policies. And Liam's gonna resend the District 43 rate sheet.
I sent it.
Already done both then.
Okay, any other business? Okay, and question period from the public.
No.
All right, and our next meeting,
June 4th.
June 4th.
It's okay with me.
Yeah, you just say,
All right.
unanimous consent, let's adjourn.
We get to adjourn?
Yep.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded. All in favor? Thank you kindly, everybody. That was a lot. We got a lot done. It feels like
Well
there's
done.
movement happening,
Do the
so.
hearts
Well done,
again, Leo.
Fraser, well done.
All right, thanks, guys.
I'll talk to you when we get back.